Welcome back to another episode of the React Native Radio Podcast. Episode 362, Storybook with Daniel Williams.
So, Robin, did you watch the latest Artemis 2 stuff that happened recently?
Obsessively.
Obsessively, okay.
I obsessively watched.
Oh, wait, didn't you change your computer background?
Yeah.
To the rocket?
Yeah, all my wallpaper is the moon pictures they sent back. I had the live stream going pretty much all the time.
Nice.
You could say I hyper focused on it for 10 days. But yeah, I had a lot of fun. I love space. I love space and space travel and stuff. Mm-hmm. So yeah, I had a lot of fun following the mission. Did you watch it?
I did. So I was off that week when they launched, and we, took a little family trip. And as soon as we arrived to where we were, I looked at the time. I was like, oh, they're launching in an hour. So put it on TV, and we watched it while we're prepping dinner.
Oh yeah, I watched it with my kids, and they're like, "Oh my god, it's a rocket!"
Exactly, same. Yeah. With my son, he was like, "Wait, so where are they going? The moon?" Yeah, and that just opened up a conversation with a 4-year-old about space travel and stuff. So. But no, that was great. And then I saw when the capsule was in the ocean, right as...
The splashdown is less, it's less exciting than
you don't
the
get
launch.
to see the flames, right? Because it's 3,000 degrees or something.
No, yeah. You kind of just see them coming down with the parachutes, and then they're bobbing in the water for an hour before they're finally pulled out of the capsule.
Someone got there, started opening it up, sort of thing. But yeah, I think when they re-enter Earth, if there's all the flames you see in the movies and the cartoons, I think that people
but they just don't have camera. They don't have a camera is not going to be able to capture that because it's super hot.
Well, then why won't you just launch a camera close enough to capture?
Because then that camera would be burning up if it was in the...
Well, it could get far enough, right? You could just still zoom in. We have Zoom. I can zoom on my iPhone.
They're smart people. They'll figure it out.
Exactly. Well, I wonder what SpaceX is thinking right now through all of this stuff. Too, so
I do know some SpaceX fans on Reddit were a little salty that everyone was,
I'm sure,
super into this NASA mission.
Yeah. Well, NASA and SpaceX use React Native, so we have to
be
nice to both of them.
That's true.
Yeah.
Space is cool all around.
Well, as always, I'm Mazen. I'm your host. I'm a staff software engineer at Infinite Red, and I'm accompanied by Robin, my co-host.
Hello.
Director of Engineering here at Infinite Red. And today we have Danny Williams with us. Welcome to the show, Danny.
Hey, thanks for having me.
Yeah. Well, before we begin, can you introduce yourself to our listeners?
Sure. Yeah. So I'm Danny. I'm a senior React Native developer at Callstack, and I'm also the maintainer of React Native Storybook, and a few other packages. Something called Vite plugin React Native Web. So that's React Native Web support for Vite. And also recently started taking over Repack, which is an alternative bundler for React Native. Other than that, I'm half English, half Brazilian. I live in Porto, in Portugal. I'm into sci-fi and coffee.
I love it.
That's awesome. Sci-fi and coffee. Love it.
This is maybe getting into the topic too much ahead of time, but does the Repack stuff and the Storybook stuff overlap? Do you find that being the Repack person is actually feeding into the Storybook stuff at all?
Interesting. I mean, that's a good question. I think it will. I'm very much at the beginning. I joined Callstack back in December, and before then, I got to know the Callstack guys when I went to ReactConf. And I met the Repack maintainer there, and we got to talking a lot. And I got a lot more interested in it since then. And it just so happened that I started, taking on some of the work on maintaining Repack recently. And what I've done so far really is I've added a Storybook plugin for Repack, and just started to look through the issues and stuff. So I'm not that deep into it, but I think that it will, in some ways, In other ways, not really at all, because, you know, the bundler world is quite different from other types of libraries or like building apps or design systems. And so that can be like, there is overlap because a lot of there is stuff with Storybook where it involves like, you know, bundler configuration and like doing clever things with that. Like one of the main features nowadays with Storybook is that it can automatically import all your story files. You used to have to like import them all manually, and now there's like this required context thing that the Expo team pushed in to help with Expo Router, and that made it like, you know, there's a lot more of these sort of bundler features that you rely on now in Storybook. So there's definitely some overlap.
Well, spoiler alert, we'll get into that a little bit more, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But we should probably hear from our sponsor.
Well, before we do that, for our listeners, if you haven't heard, Repack is basically an alternative to Metro. So if you're looking for something other than Metro, Repack is the other solution out there. But yes, before we get into our topic, let's hear from our sponsor. Infinite Red is a premier React Native consultancy located fully remote in the US. We're a team of 30 senior plus level React Native developers and support staff and have been doing this for over a decade. If you're looking for React Native expertise for your next project, hit us up at infinite.red/radio. Don't forget to mention that you heard about us through the React Native Radio podcast. And also, I should probably mention, Chain React is coming again this summer, July 30th to 31st. And the 29th will be workshops also, if you sign up for that. Get your tickets at chainreactconf.com. And I'm sure if you listen to future episodes, we might have some coupon codes going out there, or even just on Twitter. I know I'll be making a special announcement. By the time this episode comes out, you'll know what I mean by that. So
come see us in Portland.
Yeah. Just pack your bags. Let's do this. Well, let's do it. Let's get into today's topic. As we teased earlier, we're going to talk to Danny about Storybook and all the latest stuff that's kind of come in to Storybook, specifically Storybook 10, because I feel like that's a big jump that you all did and improvement on Storybook. And we'll kind of dig into everything that's happened since then. So let's, rewind a little bit, Danny. For our listeners who haven't heard of Storybook before, what's your elevator pitch for it?
Storybook is a toolkit for building UI components, and it's also a really extendable toolkit. So there's all kinds of ways that you can use Storybook. But I think the main one is kind of like building out your design system and, having a place where you can see all of your components together. And there's like sort of a documentation component to that, whether it's just like having them all listed in one place, or if the actual documentation features of Storybook. And so you can really like take it quite far because there's all kinds of add-ons that extend the functionality. You can even like bring in a Figma plugin that shows you the design. Yeah. And it gets a bit more complicated when we start to talk about like, okay, well, how does React Native Storybook fit into that? But React Native Storybook is like almost like an extension of that, but it's also separate in the sense that the web Storybook works quite differently. It like spins up its own web server and runs on its own. But
the goal is largely the same.
Yeah, exactly. And there's just limitations with how React Native works, where you have to kind of rethink how Storybook works.
Yeah, I've used Storybook for a long time. I've probably several versions behind what's the latest and greatest, but it is really useful for showing the implementation of your design system, right? Because like obviously your designers have the complete design system, like how everything works in Figma, but it's all theoretical until you have a component built in React Native that does all the things that it's supposed to do. And Storybook is like, hey, here's the actual component in the app, and it's like a demonstration of how it works with all its different configurations and whatever, but it goes from the theoretical to the actual.
Yeah, exactly. And I think like that's a interesting point to hit on as well, which is that sometimes it's quite difficult to collaborate with designers without like, let's say you make a component that was sort of spec'd out in Figma, and then you want to show them the component, and sometimes your component is like nested in the app somewhere, and you can't really
and it's only doing like one permutation of its props, and like it's hard to So Storybook is really really useful for that.
Yeah, so like you'll have all these different states that are like can be really difficult to recreate. And sometimes you create a component, or like you might want to create a component before you then go ahead and use it in a bunch of places. And what you end up doing is making your own sort of sandbox for, displaying the component and its different states. And then you're sort of messing around with it in real time. And what you end up doing is almost like recreating your own storybook. The storybook is kind of for that purpose. It's for many purposes. It's for like sharing your design system. It's for developing your components, and it's also for testing in a lot of ways. I mean, at the web more so because it actually has like a testing framework now. It's sort of built into Storybook. It makes you sort of like v-test browser mode. But even in terms of like React Native, you can still sort of get a lot of what like testing does for you. I think for UI, when you do like unit tests, it's a lot of just like, oh, I set the color to red and then the style prop is red. And that's completely pointless, right? Like I've always hated those kind of unit tests. And I think that Storybook is a much better way of being like, oh, it's actually red because I can see that it's red. And that's what you actually care about.
Yeah. And you're hinting at like visual regression testing too. So I think we'll get into that a little bit more because I know testing specifically is something that people overlook when it comes to Storybook because people are like, oh, Storybook, my design system, and hopefully you have a design system. If you don't, please do. And it's just your way to show your design system to product, to designers, and be like, hey, did I miss anything?
And to help you develop, right? You're like building components. Yes. You put it in Storybook, and as you add stuff, you're watching the Storybook before you even put your component in a screen. You're using it to.
You're saving yourself a lot of time as you're developing too, right? If your designers are disciplined in using the component name and the props that they set out in the design system, and you kind of replicate that in React Native, building is just going to be like Lego blocks, I guess. Speaking to every parent here where, you're doing Legos every night. It's just like Lego. You just put A and B together and all of a sudden you have your car. I mean, your app.
And it's interesting, I think now as well with Figma has some like newer features like the variables and stuff. And like you can almost, in a way, there's a lot of the stuff that you get in Storybook in Figma to some degree, like where you can like change the variables in real time. But obviously that doesn't translate to your actual code base, right? But what that does is it means that you can have your designers almost on the same page where they're thinking about the different like properties and variables. And then, now with like AI tooling and like Figma MCP, a lot of that can like really like translate over really well. And I kind of see that as a future of the way people develop with Storybook is going to be more and more that integration with the design tools where you can kind of, a lot of the work is going to be in like setting up your variables and stuff correctly in Figma, that kind of thing. And then you're just setting up a sort of pipeline, a workflow with Claude or whatever, where it can like really take those variables and it knows your design system and like sort of spans out and just creates your component and all its states and things. I can sort of picture that in the future.
Cool. Yeah. I think, while we're talking about testing, I think let's just continue on this topic for a second because I have a couple questions to ask you. In your, as the maintainer of Storybook from a React Native capacity, right? How would you set up your, let's start with something, I hope by me saying simple, this is simple, but how would you set up some sort of visual regression testing with Storybook?
Yeah, so there's like multiple facets to this, I would say. Like for React Native, there's not like one correct way right now. I mean, I have in mind some ways that I would do it. When you look at the web, there are some really like well-defined solutions like Chromatic, which is the company that's really behind the maintenance of Storybook, especially on the web side, right? And they have the Chromatic is a solution that is visual regression testing for web, and it's very much sort of plug and play. It's like if you have Storybook set up, it's just going to work. And that's possible because you can do a lot more with like bundlers on the web, and you don't have to think about like all the different devices and stuff that you have to target. You have to think about different browsers, but browsers nowadays they're very easy to run, like headless browsers, and you can spin up whatever you want in there. With React Native, you're thinking about like, oh, which device do I want to run my Storybook on? And like,
you're getting into device farms and it gets complicated quickly.
Yeah. And so like to answer that question, like I would just use the tools that people already use for testing. And like Maestro historically hasn't had visual testing, but they recently added a solution for taking screenshots. And one of the things that is sort of built into React Native Storybook that isn't really built into the web yet is that you can control your React Native Storybook remotely with WebSockets, and there's now also an option to use REST. So you can just remotely control your Storybook, and then you can imagine, you know, especially if you're doing like Detox or like Appium, you can just like call fetch on the Storybook endpoint and just set the story, and then take a screenshot. And you would just kind of use the tools that you would already use to do screenshots testing for React Native Storybook. But you know, sort of mini teaser is that there is going to be a more official solution pretty soon, but it's kind of not something I can really get into the details of at this point because I'm not really working on it, but I know that that is underway basically.
Oh, okay.
I know personally, you know, speaking with clients who are always asking about visual regression testing, that's something that is untapped in React Native. Because like you mentioned, we have web, you have one browser, you can just open it, you know, expand it, shrink it, and you can almost get what you need out of that small, simple interaction, right? With mobile, we're talking about iOS, Android, and then within that, we're talking about, you know, pixel densities, lower end devices, tablets, foldables. I mean, I could keep going, right? And that just unlocks a lot with not just the testing of your components, but the visual aspect. What happens to your app when you open it on a foldable device? Are you going to test that with Storybook and then kind of get a test from that, right? So it opens up a large can of worms. And to hear that there's potentially a solution coming down the line, that's pretty exciting. I know it's something that I'd personally want to try out.
Yeah. I'm pretty excited about it as well. I mean, over the years, I've made a lot of examples and I've been sort of working towards something that can just work with like existing tooling. But it always just feels kind of lacking because I don't think that there is much focus on visual testing. I mean, we saw OWL come out a while back. I don't know if you guys, you probably heard of it. So like basically it's fine, but I never really... it didn't really work that well for me. Like I tried setting it up in some new expert projects and couldn't quite get it to work the way I wanted. And, you know, I've tried doing it with Detox, but they basically tell you like, oh, go off and make your own thing. Like, so it's like, what's the point then? You know, you're not going to offer it. Then we may as well build our own thing essentially. And I've done some of that work, but now, you know, essentially, that's being taken on by Chromatic. I think I can say that, but Chromatic will have their solution for React Native. Maybe I'll check with them if I can actually share that. But yeah, so we'll have a like official visual testing solution, and I think it's going to be in the beginning maybe not, you know, the perfect solution, but I think anything is going to be good because what we have right now just doesn't really like check all the boxes like you would want it to.
Yeah, and I remember there was a tool that I was very excited about, Percy. They were also planning to do visual regression testing or visual testing in general, which included regression, right? I know they're still around, but I think they're just mainly web. And I think at Chain React 2019, I believe, they announced that they're starting work on Percy for React Native. But I don't know where that ended up, and hope
7 years ago.
Yeah,
I mean, they should get in touch.
Yeah, well, they should reach out if they're working on React Native and stuff, and that would be very helpful. But yes, kind of end off on your point, Danny. Like you and I will sit down on React Native Live soon in June, I believe, where we get to show some of this stuff off. So hopefully we can kind of answer some questions that our listeners might have based around that. So coming back to your latest release, version 10 that just dropped. What should people be most excited about version 10 and, you know, what's come out of it?
I guess that depends. Are we talking just Storybook in general? Or?
I would say, yeah, Storybook in general, but like also Storybook React Native.
Okay. Yeah. I think for Storybook in general, there's been a lot of work, to be honest, with Storybook to slim things down and to kind of like cut the fat and make it faster. And that just keeps like that work just keeps moving forward. I think in version 10, there was like a 30% bundle size reduction. And a lot of that was just like removing CJS, so CommonJS.
Yeah.
And that actually ends up being an improvement for React Native Storybook as well, because you had to do all these hacks to make sure that it would resolve the right bundle that you wanted. And now it's just like, okay, well, it just has to work with the ESM, and that kind of simplifies the things in the process. But it also means that we have to make sure that everything is being handled in terms of like ESM. And if you know anything about like the ESM and CJS trade-offs, you've probably run into like a million different problems with like, oh, my TypeScript config doesn't work with, it doesn't let me put TS extensions. And yeah. So, I mean, that's been mostly like a maintenance thing. But it's really just sort of slimming down Storybook, making it more modern. And I think that's been a problem or like a complaint that people have had with Storybook, because it's just, oh, it's too bloated. And I think that argument, you know, people could still make that argument potentially, but I think it's hard to make that argument anymore because there's been so much work put into the performance and to the bundle size. And, you know, whether you have that, I think it's like E16, the like performance guys, the web performance guys, there's like a group that work on performance, and they've gotten involved with Storybook and like replaced pieces of it. Like Lodash has become like ES Toolkit and all those sort of slimming down things where you, okay, this is the modern version, and let's use more of the like the browser built-ins and all that kind of thing. So that's been like one large part of it. It's just like making the fundamentals better. And then there was this whole like mocking feature. So it's kind of like the second iteration actually of mocking in Storybook. And mock is like pretty important if you want to do like bigger pieces in Storybook, right? And that's become a lot better in the latest version, where it just kind of works seamlessly. I think it's based on the v-test mocking. So if you're familiar with that, it's the same thing basically. And it's really nice if you have like a big Storybook and you're showing screens, which especially on the web is like, I think a solid use case that people underutilize, where you can really like get your screens into specific states, right?
Right. I imagine a lot of people had trouble with things like mocking and said, well, no, we'll just keep it to like the dumb components and not do it with screens. But it's really cool that it's possible. Yeah,
I think that like it's also the most obvious use case for Storybook is design systems, right? So I think that that's always like the first thought, but I think it just sort of expands out of there. Like I think sometimes you end up with like multiple Storybooks. People have really crazy setups with Storybook, you know, like I had one at a previous job where we had like a Storybook in our app that we would do the screens, and we'd have a Storybook on our design system. And that was like the components on their own.
I would never have thought of having multiple storybooks, but it makes so much sense. Because you're like, okay, this is the story, but like literally like a book. Like this is the storybook that's about the design system. But then there's this other storybook that's about like the integration, basically, of screens and stuff.
Exactly. And I mean, Storybook is so flexible and extensible that you can do all these things, right?
Right. And it's just it's a tool. It's a palette. Like you can use it for.
You can even like put multiple storybooks into one. There's a sort of a Storybook Connect feature or something. I can't remember the exact name, but you can have like multiple storybooks inside one storybook. So yeah, it gets kind of crazy. And then I guess another one of those like new features in Storybook 10, getting back to that, I keep getting sidetracked. So there's a new syntax for stories, basically called like CSF Next or it's CSF Factories. The name's changed a couple times, but it's basically a new, more type-safe version of the Storybook like stories syntax. So, and that's going to be really interesting. Not fully supported on React Native yet, but I have it in PR, and there's just some like weird things to figure out before it's like fully supported. So hopefully version 11 will have that working. I mean, right now it's in preview, so kind of safe for the moment. But I think that one's a pretty cool one as well. The other one is we've got like React Server Components testing in Storybook, which I think is actually one of the most interesting solutions I've seen for, or maybe the only solution I've seen for testing with React Server Components. Because it's kind of complex to do because you need a sort of end-to-end test.
Right. It's like you have to have a server.
Right. And that's where it's really smart.
Or like a mocked server somehow.
Exactly. So, and in this like version of React Server Component testing, it runs in the browser. So like there's a server in your browser that serves the server components in the table. So wait,
the browser on the device or the browser like on your dev machine?
So this specifically for the web. There's basically, I don't know the full like details of how everything works because that's been, I think it's Casper that's been working on that, and he's, a super smart guy, much smarter than me. So
we had him on the show just like a couple weeks ago.
Yeah.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Oh, nice. Yeah, I mean, I don't know the internals of it, but I just know that it sounded really cool when they showed me yeah. So that one's really cool. And there's a new testing syntax. But a lot of those things are like web specific. Like in React Native version 10, the main thing was basically just making it easier to strip Storybook from the bundle. And like a simpler, like there's like a wrapper function you put around the Metro config.
Because like what I remember is, because I've been using Storybook since like forever ago. But what I remember is like, I had to go into like app.js and like change a variable that's like, is Storybook true or false?
Yeah.
And I take it's a little bit more.
It's still getting better. Let's just say like, it's always been a kind of complicated question because I think for React Native specifically, it has generally been better to just have a separate app for Storybook. Mm-hmm. And I think that's something that people maybe don't realize they could do, like, or maybe you don't want to do it because you don't have a mono repo. Yeah. But that's, I think, probably the better way. Like in the web, it makes a lot more sense to have, you can just have a Storybook next to your code because it will just spin up its own web thing and none of that's going to get into a bundle. And it's a lot just like, it's more straightforward. But in React Native, it's like, Metro doesn't really do tree shaking and it doesn't really like do anything fancy with bundling. I mean, there's some cool stuff that's getting there now with like, I think Evan and team are like pushing really hard to make Metro better. This is one of those things where like I get excited about like things like Repack because I think we need more like modern bundling for React Native.
So I guess that's why I was curious, like with you working on Repack and also Storybook, Storybook, is there opportunities for like Repack to be like Storybook first, like really good at Storybook integration in particular, like maybe more so than Metro and maybe
definitely easier than doing it with Metro, I would say. Like, I think this is one of those things where like over time, I think I'm going to see the solution and it's going to sort of evolve out of different pieces of things. There's a lot of what's happened in Storybook as well. It's like you figure out like one little thing and then another thing over here, and then suddenly all the pieces come together and like, oh, well, if I just did that, that's kind of what I'm hoping for. I think over time that could be a really cool solution, especially Repack is the kind of the micro front ends like bundler for React Native. So that's the main like selling point, is that you can use like model federation and have like different teams working on like fully separate parts of your app, which is like a really interesting concept. It's a lot more used on the web, but being able to do that in React Native unlocks a lot of things for like bigger teams, right? Like if you have like 10 teams and they're all trying to merge, you probably have like a queue of like 10 people waiting to see if they can merge today. And then they don't get to because the CI takes like an hour to run, like that whole process, you can just, sidestep it. And that's what's pretty interesting, I think, about Repack.
Mazen knows a lot about waiting on CI to be able to merge PRs recently.
That's been a huge issue with my current app. Yeah. And I think just to mention on that, I've always pushed my clients to have multiple apps. One for specifically for Storybook, which gets shared to just the designers, right? So you have a smaller scope where you don't have to go through all the device IDs, UDID collections when it comes to iOS, and then doing all that. So it's always nice to do it where you're not only just doing what I like to call your atoms, your small stuff, like your text component, your button component and all that, but then also doing larger compositions. So like if you have let's say you're talking about like an e-commerce app, right? Like your item row, like you actually
get
show
into
that
much
off.
more business logic specific.
Yes.
Like, yeah.
Yeah. And then like you mentioned there, Danny, like if you're able to combine all that into monorepo that uses something like mock service worker, if you're using that on your mobile site, so I'm giving away the architecture of the app kind of thing. Like we had mock service worker handling all that, right?
As long as we don't say which client it is.
Exactly, right? So it was 2 apps all in a monorepo where the design system was, its own quote unquote package that got bundled there. And it kind of handled it that way. So it worked for us. And I think once we got to production, we decided to just drop Storybook and then just come down to a single repo. That was a large pull request before we went live. We had a full regression test go off of that. But our reasoning for doing that was no new components are going to come out of this. And if any new components did come out of it, right, new features that we were building, they would be feature flagged and then enable them specifically for specific people to validate and kind of go from there.
Yeah, I mean, I know firsthand that Storybook isn't always like the best fit. Like, and a lot of the time you'll find is like Storybook, you'll be using it a lot at the beginning of the project until you reach a certain level of maturity.
Yes.
And then unless you have like a full like design system team, like it starts to like dwindle because like a lot of the work that you were doing then, it just set you up for everything else, right?
Yes.
And then, yeah, well, as long as it does its job up until the point where you don't need it anymore, then, we're happy basically. I think there's still ways to bring it into the workflow, but every team works differently, and I totally get it. Like there are projects where I've just not used Storybook even as the maintainer, where I'm like, well, when I need it, I'll bring it in, kind of thing. And
sometimes it's too big of a hammer, and you
yeah, exactly. Yeah. I mean, I've had like thoughts about a sort of Storybook Lite version in the past. Like I get these ideas sometimes, and I never end up like going all the way. Maybe now with all this AI stuff, I'll end up doing it. But I think there's potentially room for like a way simplified version of a Storybook where it's literally just like, oh, look for all the files in this folder and render out like the default view of them. And you could just not have any of those dependencies, just have like a scroll view or something. And that could be like something you could really basically, like really simple thing you could just build in to your app, maybe even just to a custom thing. And sometimes that's enough, right? Yeah. And it's really when you start having more like complex use cases where you're like, oh, well, I actually definitely need Storybook. Or maybe from the beginning, that it's going to evolve in a certain way. And then you're like, oh, I need Storybook because we're going to have to collaborate with designers, or we have like multiple teams that are all going to use the same design system. Like sometimes you have a big company where they'll have like 4 different apps using the same design system, right? And that Storybook's never going away because there needs to be some way of like testing those in isolation. So there's all kinds of different setups, right?
Yeah, and I think what you mentioned there about a scroll view that has all your components, that screams to me Ignite, our boilerplate. We have a demo showroom that pretty much does that.
It's and literally a scroll view with like
every component, every iteration
components
of it, right? And our objective there was Ignite is supposed to be small, and we don't, we weren't going to make a decision on whether to use Storybook or not because we, not all our clients use Storybook. It's our battle tested boilerplate where we use it on most of our clients. We can have a discussion around whether to include it or not. So, but yeah, that's one avenue, right? At the end of the day, right? All this requires maintenance, and that's potentially a high burden for clients to kind of allocate time to. The design team might be screaming for it, but then the product team might be like, I'll put that in the backlog for you guys. So, but I want to also just be cognizant, we're getting close to time, but I want to kind of bring us back to another release that you did right after 10, which was 10.3. That big addition was the addition of MCP Server for AI agents. Can you explain how that kind of enables development and what it would look like for day-to-day flow for a developer?
Yeah, so I think nowadays, right, I think we're all sort of developing in this new way where, well, still everything's evolving, right? Like sometimes you're not sure if next week you're still going to be using the same flow because maybe some new models coming out next week. So, right? Like, and the funny thing about Storybook MCP is like that started getting worked on where like MCP was like the big hotness at the time. And then it was skills and, and I think MCP will have a comeback, to be honest. But yeah, like it's funny, the sort of world, the developer world right now, because everything is a bit up in the air. But I do think that we are sort of adapting to a new workflow, right? Like as developers, which is going to be, how do I give my agent the context it needs? And it's always about context, but it's also about giving the right context, right? And I think the problem that you can have, let's say, for example, I'm developing an app and I'm on the login screen and I just need to like add maybe a new state for the input component. And this is sort of the same old thing with Storybook, right? Like, I need to add like an error state, and it's really annoying for me to get to this screen and then add the error state. But and it's the same with a model, right? Like if you screenshot a whole screen and say like, oh, look at my login screen, I need an error state for this input component. It's basically telling the random number generator what you want and hoping that it generates the right number, right?
Yeah.
And that's where I think that Storybook can fit in an interesting way in workflows going forwards, where you can say like, okay, let's say we bring up the design system app, like, maybe we're in our separate app that's just the Storybook, and we go to the input story, or we tell the agent, go to my, let's go and add a component, and it'll know because you've given it instructions that you're using Storybook, and you've got the MCP there, so it knows that it can look at all your components that you have in your design system. And then it will say, okay, we need to look at this input component. And then for that input component, it can get the potential props that it has available, the different states that we have in our stories. And also any documentation that you've added there will be fed to the agent. And then so you can sort of pinpoint the specific thing that you're interested in, and not only you but your agent, right? So and in that way you don't get the whole screen anymore. Like if you're trying to just do that one input, you can target it like specifically at what you're trying to do. And if you're using something alongside that with like Figma MCP, for example, and you're saying, oh, like here's the Figma link, here's our Storybook, you can even give it the story name. And then I think the vision there really is to say, well, just look what we have, look what's in Figma, and just fill in the gaps, and it'll just go away. You walk off, have your coffee, come back, and you've got a design system fully working.
Crazy world that we're living in.
Right? And then you bring in the Callstack incubator project agent device, then be shilling Callstack for a moment, basically. And then it could like look at it on the device itself. And I think that's where these things get really interesting, is when you start combining all the different tools. You've got like the React Dev Tools CLI, the agent device CLI, and then, all of those things together, your device, it's completely visible now to the agent. And I think Storybook's just fitting in there as another layer on that, which is like, oh, send me to just that story so I can screenshot just the input. Something like React Native Storybook as well has the ability to turn off all the Storybook UI. And because it has this ability to be controlled externally, you can turn off all the UI and just have your agent completely control Storybook. Go to the story that you care about. Try to have it create that error state. It can control the Storybook. It can fill in the props that are missing. All of those things. I think there's probably still work to do. Like maybe we need skills to like tie these things together. But I think it's going to evolve, especially now the community is getting a hold of it. And, we'll see what other workflows like spin out of that. But it's like I think it's like the seed of a new type of workflow with design systems. And hopefully, it's going to be really useful to anyone who's using Storybook now. And it's available in React Native Storybook out of the box on 10.3. You have to enable it. So maybe out of the box isn't the right way of putting it. But if you just enable it, it will start up a server.
So you just have to turn it on.
Yeah, exactly. You just turn that on. And part of the functionality of the the with Storybook like Metro wrapper is there's like a WebSocket server that runs there and a REST server, which is a recent thing. And that's what sort of powers all this. With a MCP server, you need some sort of way of receiving the request from the agent, right? So it's basically just been added on there to that server, and it just becomes a part of Storybook and how it works.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. I think, like you mentioned, the day and age that we're in, this is something that people are leaning more towards to kind of help them get their flows.
Right. They want their agents to be able to do everything that they would have done as a human, which includes like, hey, I have a design system in Figma and Storybook set up, make them match. And so, yeah, your agent has to be able to talk to all your tools.
Exactly.
So you tease some stuff coming up in the future that you can't talk about yet. So where should our listeners go follow, pay attention to in order to be the first to know about the secrets that you've got coming?
Yeah, I think, follow on Twitter, basically me, the Storybook guys, the Storybook accounts, just Twitter, LinkedIn. If you're not a fan of Twitter, I know, if it wasn't the place for where all the devs go, I might not be on Twitter, to be honest.
The fact that we're still calling it Twitter, however many years later, says all you need to know.
Exactly. There's no way. I can't.
I know. I will never call it that.
Yeah.
Never.
Exactly.
It's always Twitter.
But yeah, it will be coming up.
What is your Twitter handle?
Yeah, my Twitter handle is it's kind of an awkward one. I didn't get a good one. Basically, it's Danny_H_W.
Awesome. Yeah. So hopefully, our listeners can follow along there and kind of see what you all are working on. And I do know the Storybook Twitter, at least that's where I listen. I, heard about the version 10.
Right.
So that's also an active one that our listeners can go to. Well, unfortunately, I think we're at time here. Danny, I really appreciate. Thanks for coming on to the show. This was enlightening.
Makes me want to go try Storybook 10.
Yeah. Give it a go.
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's been really good fun. Thanks for having me on. I was wondering, can I shout out one thing on that'd be okay? So basically, I'm living here in Porto, and I started a community here in Porto for React Native developers. Yeah. And we're gonna have I don't know when this is coming out, but we're having our next meetup on this in June. I think it's June 11th. I can confirm that later, but basically there's a meetup page. If you're following me, you'll be able to find that through Twitter as well. It's called, on Twitter, it's React Native OPO, OPO. And there you'll see that we have a new event coming up. And if anyone's in Porto or surrounding areas, then show up. And if anyone wants to speak, we're also looking for speakers. So that would be cool.
Oh yeah, we will put links to both of those, the Twitter and the meetup page, in the show notes. And
awesome, appreciate it.
Go to Danny's meetup.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks again, Danny. So that's it for our episode. Robin, to send us off, do you have a mom joke?
Oh, I have a good one. This is Darren posted this in our Slack. I have a horse named Mayonnaise.
Yeah, I saw that one.
Because he's a horse? Okay.
That's okay. Yeah, I get it. That's a good one. Okay.
That's a good one.
Nice.
Awesome. Well, thank you all. See you all next time.
All right. Bye.
Bye.
As always, thanks to our editors, Todd Worth, Tyler Williams, and Jed Bartosky, our marketing and episode release coordinator, Justin Husky, and our guest coordinator, Mazen Chami. Our producers and hosts are Jamin Holmgren, Robin Hines, and Mazen Chami. Thanks to our sponsor, Infinite Red. Check us out at infinite.red/radio. A special thanks to all of you listening today. Make sure to subscribe to React Native Radio on all the major podcasting platforms.